Hey guys, my name's Pocket and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue with my Season 11 guide series and we're going to be talking about Senna. Now I know a lot of you will have come here to see Senna support and others to see Senna ADC. For that reason, I'm going to make this video about both of these roles. The great thing about Senna is that right now her runes are identical for both support and ADC, and the real difference comes in the builds. So rest assured, if you're here for ADC or support, this is going to be the guide for you. As usual, I'll put timestamps in the video description if you need to get to anything specific. And if you've got any questions, do leave a comment or you can hop into my Twitch stream. I stream every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'm sure I'll be able to help you out. So let's start off by talking about Senna's abilities and her passive so that you can get a really good idea about who Senna is and what she can do. To start off, Senna's basic attacks work a little differently to a normal champion's basics. Instead of a normal projectile auto attack, Senna will blast her target with her relic cannon. She will still apply on-hit effects, but these attacks have a few special little differences. Firstly, when Senna critically strikes, she only does 150.5% damage. This is as opposed to the 175% damage that a standard champion's critical strikes will do. Also, these attacks will not benefit from attack speed in the same way as other champions. The benefit from attack speed for Senna is about 1/3 of the benefit of what a normal champion would get. And also, as you'll probably see here, Senna's attacks have a wind up before she blasts them with her cannon. This wind up duration is based on Senna's champion level and attack speed. Now for Senna's actual passive. Senna's actual passive is called Absolution. Senna's basic attacks and damaging abilities will apply mist to an enemy champion for 4 seconds. If Senna applies mist to the same target twice, she will collect the mist from that champion. This will give her 1 stack of mist for her passive, as well as deal 1 to 16% of the target's current health as bonus damage. This percentage is based on your champion level, so it scales into the late game. Also, enemy units that die near Senna have a chance to spawn a Mist Wraith. The Mist Wraith will be around for 8 seconds, and it's a small targetable little wraith that drops on the ground. Senna can collect these wraiths by either using a basic attack on them, hitting them with her Q, or even her R. The things that can drop mist wraiths are enemy champions and large monsters, who will always drop 1, epic monsters, who will always drop 2, and minions and smaller monsters that will have a percentage chance to drop. If you kill the minion, there's less of a chance that it will drop a mist wraith. So now we've learned how to stack mist on Senna. What does it actually do? Well, for each stack of mist, Senna gains 0.75 bonus attack damage, and for each 20 stacks, Senna gains 25 bonus range, as well as 10% critical strike chance. If Senna happens to exceed 100% crit strike chance, she will convert all of the excess crit chance into lifesteal at a rate of 35%. And finally, on top of all of these other things, Senna has yet another passive. Her basic attacks deal 20% AD bonus physical damage on hit and grant 10, 15, or 20% of the target's movement speed as bonus movement speed to you for 0.5 seconds. So I know that this can seem extremely confusing, especially to newer players, but rest assured, while it takes quite a little TED talk to get through it all and explain it all to you, it really isn't that difficult to use. A lot of these passives kind of drive themselves. The thing that you need to understand is that there will be mist wraiths dropping on the ground, so make sure to keep an eye out for them. And also, by using an ability or a basic attack on an enemy champion twice in short succession, you can grab a mist stack from them as well. Now let's talk about Senna's actual abilities. Senna's Q is Piercing Darkness. When activated, Senna fires a spectral laser in the direction of the target unit. She will heal herself and all allied champions in the line and deal physical damage to all enemies in a thinner line within this healing beam. This ability can be targeted onto anything that you can basic attack. This includes enemy minions, enemy champions, enemy towers, wards, or other structures, but it can also be targeted on allies. This includes allied minions, allied champions, allied structures, and even allied traps such as Shaco boxes or Teemo mushrooms. Also, regardless of whether or not you targeted it onto one of these things, if you strike an enemy turret or an enemy ward with this beam, it will be considered to have been basic attacked once. This means that you can hit turrets at an extreme range by targeting something within the middle of you, and you can also take down wards at an extreme range in the same way. This is something that we're going to talk about a little later on, but the key thing to note here is that because it considers them to have been basic attacked, it will apply on-hit effects to all of these things, including enemy champions. And finally, basic attacks reduce Piercing Darkness's cooldown by 1 second on hit. This means that the more you are using auto attacks, the quicker you'll get your Q cooldown back. This can be quite useful in laning phase and when attacking structures, bonus, so just keep it in mind. Senna's W is Last Embrace. Senna throws a globule of black mist in the target direction, dealing physical damage and sticking onto the first enemy that it hits. In this case, enemies include minions, monsters, and champions, but not structures. After the 1 second duration, or when the target dies, the black mist spreads out of the target and roots everybody nearby in a big circle. An important thing to note here is that if the initial hit of physical damage from this ability kills the enemy minion or champion that you hit, then it will instantly root everybody around it. Once again, this can be quite important, and it's something that we're going to talk about a little later on. Senna's E is Curse of the Black Mist. When activated, Senna surrounds herself with an aura of mist and gains camouflage. Allied champions who enter the mist gain Wraith form for a duration equal to the remaining duration of the mist. When allies are in Wraith form, they also gain camouflage whenever they are inside the mist, and when they leave the mist, they will gain obscured vision. Basically what happens is they appear as these scary, crawling mist wraiths running across the ground. You will be able to tell where they are when they're outside of the mist, but they can be anywhere when they're inside of the mist. You won't be able to see them at all. When they are outside of the mist, however, you will see this scary mist wraith on the ground, so you'll know exactly where they are, but you won't know who they are. Each champion will always appear as the same wraith form, so this can be interesting when your team is trying to engage, because the enemy won't quite know which of your allies has stepped out of that mist. This camouflage can be broken by the typical things that break camouflage. These include a control ward, being near an enemy tower, or having an enemy champion get up into your mist and be able to see you by just simply being close. And if you or your allies use attacks or abilities, this will also break the camouflage. And the final thing to note about this is that while camouflaged, both you and your allies will gain 20% bonus movement speed. Now, typically you will be maxing your Q first, and then your W, and then your E. The reason for this is simply damage. Your E does not scale that well, and because it does no damage, it's just not as useful as your Q or your W for performing the kind of role that Senna is meant to play. Finally then, Senna's R is Dawning Shadow. Senna reveals herself before firing 2 beams of spectral light in the target direction. The first of these beams is extremely wide, at 2,400 units width. It's even wider than a normal lane. This beam will shield all allies that are hit by it as it fires across the entire map. It will also reveal the area, so you'll be granted vision of the entire beam for a short period. The second beam is much thinner at 320 units width, but it is also fired across the whole map, and this beam will deal damage to enemy champions. When you're using your ult, you can see the width of the small beam because it's much darker, and you should also note that the very wide beam can also collect any mist wraiths. While I wouldn't suggest using your ult solely to collect mist wraiths, this is just something that's nice to know. So, now we know how Senna works, let's talk about Senna's runes. Firstly, and like I said, this applies to ADC and support, the only keystone that you should be taking on Senna is Glacial Augment. Glacial Augment is a great rune on Senna for a few reasons. Firstly, the most obvious one, because it slows enemy champions, it really helps you to follow up and get that second hit and stack your mist. Secondly, it also gives you access to a pretty great inspiration tree with a nice selection of runes that we're going to talk about in a second. And then also, regardless of whether or not you're stacking your mist, by slowing down the enemy champions that you're attacking, it really helps you to kite, keeping yourself at a really safe range. As we talked about in Senna's passive, you stack range as you move into the late game, so it's great if you can stay at the longest range possible, because Senna's a relatively squishy champion, you're quite vulnerable, and you often don't want to allow the enemy to get on top of you. For this reason, I always take Glacial Augment, be it on ADC or support, and I suggest you do the same. Now, we've picked our keystone, so as we move into the inspiration tree on line 1, we're going to take Magical Footwear. Magical Footwear is great for 2 reasons. Firstly, it gives your boots, even the boots that you make out of these boots, an extra 10 movement speed. Like we talked about for both stacking and kiting, movement speed is fantastic on Senna, so having an extra 10 movement speed at all times is really welcome. Secondly, it saves you 300 gold. They are free boots. Especially on support, this can be huge because on a support's gold income, any amount of gold save can be totally critical to hitting your power spikes. In line 2, we're going to take Biscuit Delivery. Once again, the reasons for this is twofold. Firstly, the mana restoration in the laning phase is really good. It helps you to poke and spam abilities and get as much damage onto the enemy champions as you possibly can. Secondly, an often overlooked fact about Biscuit Delivery is that whether or not you eat or sell the biscuits, it doesn't matter. They will grant you bonus maximum mana. When all the biscuits are gone, you've got an extra 150 maximum mana, Senna, and this extra mana pool once again helps you into the mid and late game by giving you just more mana to work with. Also, for those of you who are going to be playing ADC, a little sneak peek into the builds is that you will be building Manamune, and this item scales with maximum mana, so biscuits actually give you a little bit of damage into the mid game, which is fantastic. And then on our last line, we will always, in every single game, take Approach Velocity. This item is critical on Senna, and it's one of the best runes that you can ever pick up on her. Approach Velocity gives you movement speed towards enemy champions that are movement impaired. This means that if you manage to slow them by hitting one of your massively long range Qs, or even just auto attacking them with Glacial, you'll gain a burst of movement speed towards them, allowing you to rapidly follow up and collect your miss stack. For our secondaries, we're going to go into the Precision tree, and we're going to take Presence of Mind. Presence of Mind is a fantastic rune on Senna. It really helps with your mana issues. For supports, it's really great in laning phase. Because you're often going to be poking and damaging the enemy, you will be activating this rune, which gives you bonus mana regen shortly after you've damaged an enemy champion. And for those of you who are ADCs, and once again maybe you're building Manamune, which scales with the amount of mana that you have at the time, this rune can be totally critical to your mana usage in the mid and late game, because it gives you 15% of your maximum mana restored every time you get a kill or an assist. This is really helpful in team fights and allows you to continue to use your abilities whenever an enemy champion happens to die. Secondly, we're going to take Alacrity. Alacrity is a scaling attack speed rune, and I know that I told you in the passive section that Senna doesn't scale with attack speed the same as other champions and that it's not quite as effective on her. That is true, but Alacrity is still a really great rune for Senna, especially early on. It helps you to CS because Senna's quite awkward to CS on as an ADC, and it helps you to maximize your miss stacks in lane as a support. Now, for those of you who are returning to the channel, I know I normally like to give you a selection of runes and tell you the pros and cons, but in this instance, for both ADC and support Senna, I believe that this rune set is the only one that you should ever be taking. I've played an absolute ton of Senna, both before and after the item changes, and this Glacial Augment page is what you want to be playing. And then finally, for the little rune shards at the end of the page, we're going to take Double Adaptive Force and a defensive choice to suit. Generally speaking, this will of course be armor because we'll be on the bot lane, where most of the damage is physical. And with that completed, we've now got a full rune page for Senna. So now we know what Senna does, and we know what runes to play on her. Next up, we're going to talk about builds. Now, as I said earlier, this is the first area where support Senna and ADC Senna start to diverge. So I'm going to start us off with boots and mythic items, which are going to be the same no matter what. I'll call this the core build section, and then we'll talk about the ADC itemization as opposed to the support itemization. So let's start off with the mythic item. On both ADC and support Senna, we are going to take Eclipse. Eclipse is just a fantastic item on Senna in pretty much every way, but let's break it down piece by piece and talk about exactly why this is the mythic item that you should be building on Senna. To start off, Eclipse gives us 55 attack damage, 18 lethality, and 10% Omnivamp. These are all great stats. Senna loves lethality because lethality items don't tend to come with crit or attack speed, and as we've talked about, Senna gains her own crit and doesn't tend to buy as much crit as, say, a standard crit champion. And also, crit is not as useful on Senna because she doesn't scale with attack speed as well, so she tends to want to have as much damage per hit as possible simply through attack damage and lethality stats. Also, the Omnivamp is extremely welcome. Bot lane, especially in Season 11, is quite pokey, and you're often looking to take trades. One of the great things about Senna is it's okay to take worse trades because you've got great self-sustain. Adding in that Omnivamp and the great build path of Eclipse with Vamp Scepter means that you've got even better sustain, and that's just fantastic. Eclipse also has a passive. Hitting an enemy champion with 2 separate attacks or abilities within 1.5 seconds deals 6% of the target's maximum health as bonus physical damage. It will also grant you 15% bonus movement speed and a shield for 2 seconds. Now, because you are a ranged champion, not a melee champion, the shield is a little smaller and has a bit of a higher cooldown, but this is still really fantastic. And of course, if you really think about this, it synergizes so well with your normal playstyle anyway. On Senna, especially early on and in lane and in mid game, you're often trying to get 2 hits on the enemy just to stack your mist passive, and because you're often playing around that playstyle, you're now going to proc Eclipse, which will also do bonus max health damage just like your passive, and that's just fantastic. Also, it gives you movement speed, and as we've talked about, kiting on Senna and stacking on Senna, movement speed is such a welcome stat that it really shouldn't be ignored. Finally, the mythic passive for the Eclipse offers you 4 4% armor penetration for every legendary item. Now, as we're going to talk about a little bit further on into these build sections, buying that armor penetration item isn't as easy now with the item changes as it used to be, where Mortal Reminder or Lord Dominik's was a pretty core item on Senna back in Season 10. So getting this bonus percentage armor penetration passive, giving you up to 12% bonus armor penetration on support, where you will get up to 3 other items, plus of course your support item, which doesn't count, and up to 16% bonus armor penetration on an ADC, where you will have 4 other items. This is extremely strong. So for all of these reasons combined, Eclipse in my eyes is the only mythic item that you should ever build on Senna. Now let's talk about boots. Boots on Senna are really simple. Because you love movement speed and because you love kiting, our core boots are going to be Boots of Swiftness. Boots of Swiftness offer 15 more movement speed than the other standard boots, and they also cost only 900 gold. This is opposed to attack speed boots, which you might be thinking of, which cost 1100 gold and are offering you 45 movement speed instead of 60. Like we talked about, Senna loves movement speed and doesn't scale with attack speed so well, so our aggressive boots are going to be Boots of Swiftness. Of course, in games where you're going up against a full AD comp and they're not putting out much magic damage, you can go for plated steel caps, formerly known as Ninja Tabi. These are the best defensive boots into heavy AD comps because they reduce basic attack damage by 12%, as well as offering you 20 armor. Likewise, into full AP comps, you can go for Mercury's Treads. These offer you 25 magic resist and 30% tenacity, which means they're great into full AP comps or comps with oppressive amounts of CC. Personally though, on Senna, I prefer to try and stay away from the CC. I find that if I'm getting locked down, even with 30% tenacity, it's not going to save my life. I prefer the massive movement speed increase from Swiftness boots over the other normal boots, so I tend to only buy Merc Treads when I'm going into a hugely AP-sided enemy team comp. So now we've got our boots and our mythic item. Let's talk about Senna support. Of course, on Senna support, your starting item will always be a Spectral Sickle, 2 health potions, and a warding trinket. You will then immediately begin to build your Eclipse, opting to go for the Serrated Dirk as early as possible, rather than the Vamp Scepter, because Dirk is such a huge power spike that you don't want to miss out on it, just for that little bit of extra sustain that the Vamp Scepter offers. Once you've built your Eclipse, you will finish off your magical footwear from your runes into your boots of choice, at which point you will start to move into Umbral Glaive. Umbral Glaive is a key item on Senna support for me. It offers 55 attack damage and 12 lethality, which is a little lower than similarly priced lethality items in terms of just pure damage, but it also offers 15 ability haste and a great build path, as well as a fantastic passive. Umbral Glaive's passive is called Blackout. When spotted by an enemy ward or trap, gain Blackout over a 400 unit radius for 8 seconds. You will disable all surrounding wards, as well as expose and revealed stealth wards and any traps that have been placed by the enemy. Also, your basic attacks will instantly kill revealed traps and deal triple damage to wards. This means you will one-shot stealth wards and do 3 of the 4 health bars from a control ward. Because your job as a support will include a lot of vision control, going to get wards as well as trying to clear enemy wards, this is a really key item. Good vision control should not be underestimated, and as Senna support, I will buy this in every game. Our next item on Senna support will be Rapid Fire Cannon. Rapid Fire Cannon offers you 35% attack speed, 20% critical strike, and 7% movement speed. Most importantly though, it offers you an energized passive that builds up stacks as you move and attack, and when you're at the max 100 stacks, your next basic attack will be energized. The energized attack will give you 120 bonus magic damage on hit, as well as giving you 35% bonus range up to a maximum of 150 bonus range. This is absolutely huge. It's also very easy to use because it has a big circle around you, showing you exactly your new attack range for this one hit. And alongside your great passive, the fact that you've already built tons of movement speed, and you're using Glacial Augment, you can very safely hit somebody once, move in for a second hit to grab a miss stack, also proccing your Eclipse at this point, dealing a huge amount of chunk damage, all from a relatively safe distance, at which point you can back off and take the free trade. This is a really good playstyle on Senna. It makes you very safe, it gives you great siege potential, general, and it can really help you whittle down enemies when you don't actually want to engage for a full fight. Also, of course, it helps you stack your mist, which is just going to help you scale better into the really late game. Rapid Fire Cannon is also a relatively cheap item at just 2,700 gold, and I choose to buy this in almost every game. Now on Senna support, we only have one item slot left. Of course, we've got our support item, our boots, our mythic item, our Umbral Glaive, and now our Rapid Fire Cannon, so it's a pretty important choice that you've got to make next. For me, there are two key items that can be chosen. Firstly is the Vigilant Sightstone. The Vigilant Sightstone does not offer any damage, and for those games where you're very fed or you're the only AD damage on your team, you may want to forgo this item. However, if you are behind, if you've got a lot of AD damage anyway, or really if somebody else on your team is fed and they're not relying on you quite so much, this can be a fantastic item to buy. Firstly, it has a great build path because you can build the lower versions of the Sightstones and get most of the same benefits, and these benefits include being able to store up to 3 control wards, and then once you've placed enough normal stealth wards, and this will be pretty easy on a support because hopefully you're going around and using your support item to ward anyway, it will automatically upgrade to a Sightstone that allows you to place 1 extra control ward and stealth ward than you were previously able to. This means that you can place at any one time 2 control wards and 4 stealth wards. Combining this with your Oracle's Lens and your Umbral Glaive, you have a unique ability to control vision, both denying it to the enemy and also gaining an absurd amount of vision for yourself, being able to have control wards wherever you like, for example 1 on Baron and 1 on Drake, as well as being able to gain a load of vision control from your extra stealth wards and clear them all really easily with your Umbral Glaive and your Oracle's Lens. You can just become an absolute monster for your team without them really even realizing it. The utility that this offers should not be underestimated. However, in the very, very low elos where your team isn't going to use the vision as well, and also the enemy isn't going to be putting down as many wards or clearing your wards as effectively anyway, you might want to consider going for a damage item instead. It really depends whether or not you think that you can get the most out of this vision. Personally, when I'm playing Senna in Diamond, I'm opting for this item in every game unless I am extremely fed and I've just become a secondary ADC at that point. If you do choose to not go for the Vigilant Sightstone, then our next great choice is anti-heals. You can build these items via the Executioner's Calling, which is a fantastic item for you to build early on and then just keep in your inventory if you need those anti-heals very early on into, say, an Enchanter support or other oppressive enemy healers such as Mundo or Vlad. Even with the nerfs to healing that have come out in Season 11, I still find myself opting for anti-heals quite regularly, and especially on support, it can be great to bring that utility to your team because, like we've talked about, they're not always relying on you to be an ADC and do an ADC's damage, so really don't underestimate the utility that bringing those anti-heals to the team can benefit you. Also, because you have a large amount of AoE damage on your ult and your Q, you're more capable of applying it to the entire enemy team. If you do happen to go for this route and you want to finish your item, I would currently suggest that you go for Mortal Reminder. There are 2 options, Chempunk Chainsword and Mortal Reminder, and right now Mortal Reminder, with its offering of 7% movement speed and 20% crit chance, feels much better to me. And then finally, for Senna support, if you don't need anti-heals and you don't want the ward item, my suggestion would be to go Guardian Angel or GA into full AD team comps and Yumu's Ghostblade into other comps. GA is great because it gives you a significant amount of armor as well as a good amount of attack damage and the ability to resurrect after death. This is especially useful into assassins who might be bursting you down. The hope would be that your team arrives to see them off, or that they no longer have the ability to burst you, so they'll back off, allowing you to come back to life and escape. Yumu's Ghostblade is great for kiting and in team fights because its active offers you a burst of movement speed, and it's also great for warding and vision control because it offers you a significant amount of out of combat movement speed as well. And my final suggestion for itemization on Senna support is to not build the Collector. The Collector seems in many ways to be a fantastic item on Senna, and that's because, well, it is. It offers you attack damage, lethality, crit, and a passive that allows you to execute champions when they go below 5% HP, which is really, really strong. However, on Senna support specifically, taking the Collector will mean that you will secure a significant number of kills. The execution on the passive will cause you to execute enemy champions and take the kill gold when generally speaking you're going to want it onto your ADC or other carry, and it will also cause you to execute minions, meaning that it's much harder to help your team shove without stealing all of the CS. And a secondary effect of this is you also deny yourself your missed Wraith drops, because if you kill a minion you've got a lower chance of of getting Mistwraith drop. Overall, I just think the Collector is a bad item on Senna support and you should not build it. Now, let's take a little time to talk about Senna ADC. Like I said, you'll want to go for Eclipse as your mythic item and you can make your boot choice accordingly, but your starting item on Senna ADC will be Tear of the Goddess. The reason for this is very simple. The core item on Senna ADC and the item that you will build first in every single game, even before your mythic item, is Manamune. You build this before your mythic item so that you have access to Mura Mana as soon as you max your charges. And Mura Mana is just an awesome item. It offers you 15 ability haste, 35 attack damage, and 850 mana. These are all stats that Senna loves, especially on ADC where you're going to be spamming out those abilities and trying to do as much damage as possible. You love ability haste and you love mana. On top of this, it has a passive. It grants you bonus attack damage equal to 2% of your maximum mana, and your basic attacks on hit and your abilities against enemy champions deal 4% of your maximum mana as bonus physical damage, because you're not only basic attacking enemies, but you're also going to be spamming abilities like your Q and your W, even your ult. All of these are going to benefit from this greatly, and it's all wrapped up in an item that overall costs just 2,600 gold. For that reason, I call it the core item on Senna ADC, and it is the first item that you should build in every single game. After you've built your Manamune, you'll then of course move into Eclipse as your mythic item, and then we can move on to the situational items for Senna ADC. The first item that we're going to build is the Collector. Like I said, you don't want to build this on support because it causes you to take kills and take CS. Well, that's fantastic on an ADC of course. So we're going to go into Collector straight away after our mythic item. The Collector offers 55 attack damage, 20% critical strike, 18 lethality, and like we talked about, dealing damage that would leave an enemy below 5% health will execute them. It also offers you 25 extra gold per champion kill, which I find means it's nice to get this item earlier on to really make the most of that extra gold. After the Collector, we will move into Rapid Fire Cannon. Now this is for much the same reason as for the support role, so I won't go over it again. Finally, for our sixth item, we have a few choices. Choice number 1, and the pure damage item, is Youmuu's Ghostblade. Youmuu's offers 60 attack damage, 18 lethality, and 40 out of combat movement speed. Its active also gives you 20% movement speed and ghosting for 6 seconds, and like we talked about in the support section, this will really help you to kite during team fights by using this active, allowing you to stay at safe range, and combined with its heavy damage stats, 60 AD and 18 lethality, this is for the Senna that just wants to be a teamfight monster in my eyes. Our second choice is Edge of Night. Edge of Night is a slightly more defensive choice. It offers only 50 attack damage and 10 lethality, but it also offers 325 health, and its passive grants you a spell shield that blocks the next enemy ability every 40 seconds. This is great if you're getting caught out a lot by certain abilities, and the health also gives you a lot more survivability. Senna is a relatively squishy champion to say the least, so if you're having trouble getting locked down or assassinated, this is definitely the choice for you. And finally, our last choice is Lord Dominik's Regards. This offers 30 attack damage and 20% critical strike chance, as well as 25% armor penetration. As you might be able to tell, this is for when the enemy team is very tanky and either a lot of them or maybe even just one of the more problematic enemy champions has a significant amount of armor. The percentage armor penetration is much better than lethality when they have a lot of armor, so this is a must buy into tank heavy team comps. This item also has a passive called Giant Slayer. You deal 0 to 15% bonus physical damage based on your health difference with your target. Like I said, Senna is a relatively squishy champion, and so far you've likely built nothing that increases your health. This means that most champions are going to have a relatively significant health difference with you, especially the tanks that you're probably going to be building this item to combat in the first place. It does take a health difference of 2000 HP to get to that 15%, but even before then it's still relevant and it's still a nice thing to have, because most tanks are probably going to have at least 1000 HP more than you, and I think you'd be surprised just how often you are attacking somebody with more than 2000 extra HP on you. Do note that this is based on a difference in your maximum health, not your current health, and the actual formula is 0.75% bonus damage per 100 greater maximum health than you. So there we have it. Now we know how to itemize on both Senna support and Senna ADC. Hopefully this is going to help you choose which items you want to build, and most importantly, when you want to build them. If you do have any questions though, please feel free to leave a comment. I will try and get back to every single one of you, or think about joining my Discord server. I'll put a link in the video description, and I'm sure we'll be able to help you out. And we're done. Thank you very much for watching. I really hope this has been helpful. If it has, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to catch all of my guides that are going to be coming out over the course of season 11, then hit subscribe. We're nearly at 1,000 subs already, which is really awesome. And I'll see you guys next time.